Thanks, Mike. I'm just going to invite all three of our speakers to come up and face the music, face the audience. We'll have a little chat. Is that okay for your eyes? Okay, who wants to start? Any takers? Lucia.
Yes, I just wanted to, about the island in the middle of the Swan River. If they took the Esplanade soil and dumped it in somewhere, would it actually stay there or would it drift away with the tides? And
Well, I'm a biologist. I mean, I guess that suggestion I made is slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I thought I'd throw it out there. And if there's a marine engineer who could look at the currents and substrate and stuff and say, yes, it would stay there, or it wouldn't, and that's the next question. Yeah.
We'll make it I think they've got a problem with what they dig out there. They're going to have to ship it away because it's mostly, it's muck.
Heavy metals, asbestos.
All sorts of stuff. I don't think.
Who else?
There have been many plans over the years for an island in the middle of Perth Water. It's come up with several.
And why does it get knocked back?
Just the cost and the difficulty of dredging. I think Perth's always had problems with its dredges.
We have someone over here.
I was just an observation. Obviously, the current plans are going ahead as a result of Perth being the capital of Western Australia, and there's a vast area that needs administration. So obviously, there's a shortage of office buildings and those kind of developments. What would you say to the idea that this is maybe a necessary evil in this one place in order to support that kind of development?
You asking me? I don't think that's necessarily the case because at the same time we're building a whole lot of new office developments at the North Bulls Link. So, and there's a lot of underused land around Perth. It's very low density. I mean, some of the aerial photographs you'll see. I don't think it's necessary to do that in that volume, in that location. I'm not saying don't do anything. That's not that they shouldn't do anything, but not in such volume, in such a location. Does that answer your question?
Because it really will cut off people from the river, or the city from the river, because of the size of the buildings. Because as it is now, we come down to lower buildings in the Esplanade, and then suddenly you're going to have higher buildings.
It seems like most of the people I talk to are against the idea of what the current proposal is, and yet that's what's going ahead. And like we've got places like your organisations that are to my mind coming up with better ideas. How is it that we're stuck with this thing that's going ahead when the vast majority of people don't really want it? They want something else. They want something that's like where there's more land there, where there's those tall buildings, and we've got this idea that the land is precious there, sure, but what we're doing is putting the water into the land that we've already got, making less land. And the idea, I think, of actually like going out into the river is a much better idea, or creating mudflats, like from a construction point of view, to get something to stay there. That's not that hard to do. Places like Singapore have done it, and Hong Kong, everywhere. It wouldn't be that difficult to do.
Yes.
So, like, has the horse bolted? Can we?
Well, it has to an extent because they started digging out there today. You'll be pleased to know. I can't see it. I can see perhaps common sense. I mean, cutting Riverside Drive, for example, is going to be like strangling Perth. It's not just one road. There's no alternative. Some people may not agree with that, but if you look at the broader picture, it's like this. It's like squeezing somebody's throat dry. So I think that will come back. I think that issue will revive itself. And then the other issue which will modify is that there's going to be a lot of land developed on the market, and it won't be developed. Look how long it took for the BHP site to be developed. I mean, they had a lot of legal issues and one thing and another, but the demand for those huge buildings that are located in this design is just, you know, pretty rare. Now, they might have one or two people who might want to buy them, but that, my guess is that land will stay vacant for a long, long time, and it will get up people's noses. It will be a development site, and people won't like it. And when the road gets cut, they won't like that either. So maybe there'll be a shift in policy around it. But other than that,
how does the height of those proposed buildings dovetail with what you were showing us? Like you had this step back idea of it's like those new buildings, are they like way above that line?
They're up 36, up to 36 stories high, and the ground is going to be, from what I can understand, 6 stories of car park, and then the buildings rise above it. So it won't be very attractive, either on the ground or in the shadows that it throws.
Isn't there like sort of 6 stories and that's of buildings, and then a step back to the tall buildings?
Deck car park, from what I can see.
It's just car park. I thought it was buildings.
Right, that's not the case.
No, right? Okay,
No.
perhaps.
There's a three, I mean, there's a three, they've just released the design guidelines.
Okay.
There's a 3 to 5 story podium, and then there's the height of the building above there when they're set
But it
back.
is 36
And they're
stories.
not, they're all different heights.
Okay.
All different heights.
Okay, so I'm mistaken about that, about the 6 stories.
But they have to be active facades, so they're not a blank car park.
Okay, so active facades means shops
Shops
and
and stuff
access.
like
Okay,
that. I
so
mean,
that's not quite as bad
that's
as
the
I
draft
was
guide, that's the draft guidelines.
Okay, but they're still tall.
Yeah. I've got a question. I wonder, you know, Sue, you showed a beautiful photograph, you know, plan there, with no esplanade fill, right, when the colony was first settled. I wonder what would happen today if we didn't have the esplanade and we were back to where the original shoreline was, and someone come up with a wonderful idea to fill the Swan River. I would suspect there would be a huge fight about that. I'm not arguing for or against, but I think I've been around 40 years in all these sorts of projects. I've never seen any project ever go anywhere that didn't have an enormous amount of controversy. And I refer you to Hillary's Boat Harbour, which happens to be now one of the most attractive places where people from Perth and visitors go. That is going to, if you look at the history of that, that was going to silt up the Indian Ocean, you name it. It was all the things. None of the things that was predicted to happen, happened. And now it's there. I think I've watched for 30 years the argument about bringing the city to the water to the city. I've listened to the arguments 1,000 times. No matter where you decide to build an inlet, you would have a fight. So I've actually said, ultimately, somewhere, someplace, they're going to bring the water to the city, or the city to the water, and if someone's made a decision, that's where it is. What I suspect, or what I suggest, is that that decision's been made, so you're not going to reverse it. But what I do encourage people is to get involved in the design guidelines for these buildings that surround the inlet. You can make an impact on those. They are out for public comment, and I encourage everybody to make a comment about it. I tend to agree with Ralph. The land has always been in public ownership. Do we really need to get, as public, we own it, do we really need to get a return on investment? It's ours. Now, I think what's happened is it's driven by governments that say everything's got to be cost neutral. Now, that's what I thought governments were supposed to do, provide great public places. And I'm not sure, personally, I need a return on investment.
Okay, thank you, William. If anyone wants to chat about that
Yeah.
further, I'd invite you guys to do that afterwards. I think over here we had something wanted to say.
Well, in the presentation, I think it was mainly yours, Ralph, transport is highlighted as an issue, but I think as is common in Perth, the focus seems to be on cars. Now I know that the river is also used a lot to cycle around, walk around. I have looked at some of the details and I'm really concerned about that. I'd like to know your view just about the different modes of transport, not just cars as mode of transport, walking, cycling.
Cycling, well, there was a question asked in the upper house about the cycling and the current cycleway across in front of it will be, I think, from what I understand, the answer was given, that it will be cut. So the bike path and I guess the footpath will go back onto the road, which will be a shame.
Well, I think especially considering that research has shown it's the busiest intersection for cyclists in Perth. It's used a lot to get from east to west. I have corresponded with, I don't even know all the different bodies, but basically the answer that I get back is, well, you just need to ride around the inlet, which I don't know how many extra traffic lights and intersections that's going to add to my journey with all the, I guess, unsafety that comes with it. But yeah, I think it just needs to be highlighted because the focus is very much on what is it going to do for cars getting into the city and out of the city, but there's people that get around on other ways of transport as well.
That's true. It's also supposed to be for the ferries coming across from South Perth. It's supposed to increase the use of ferries, which wouldn't be a bad thing in itself, but it will cut the bike path.
Somebody had said that when the ferries will take longer because they've got to get under into the inlet.
Take twice as long.
Will take twice as long, so people won't be so encouraged. And also, ferries will have to install toilets. Is that true? Because if you're on a ferry for more than somebody said that the other night.
The guys who run the ferries say that something like that. It now takes 6 minutes to go from South Perth. It will take roughly 12 minutes, and then they have to turn around. If they take up to 15 minutes, then they have to do that.
Put toilets in. Yes,
but they also may have to increase trees. I don't know the details. That's a minor one.
Over here?
Can I just ask, if there's a change in government, is there like the propensity for this to be changed around again so that it'll go back and there'll be a new plan, or will it just go ahead anyway? What will happen if there's a change in government?
Well, the previous government invented this idea. They're sort of caught in a bit of a loop. Nevertheless, I think from what I've heard and spoken to some of the other Labor Party people, they are much more aware of the issues that are raised by this development than they were when they first proposed it. But they're in a difficult position.
Right, okay.
I seem to remember at some point mention of Riverside Drive being sunk underground.
Well, that has been mentioned as an option. You know, Mr. Barnett said, well, one day we can sink it. I've spoken to some very senior engineers about, well, two reasons. One thing is, why would you want to sink this beautiful Riverside Boulevard in the first place? Why would you want to put it under? Second of all, the cost will be enormous. Unbelievably expensive.
I can tell. I investigated, we were involved in the Bell Tower. We investigated a tunnel underneath for the Court Company. It's a huge cost. And secondly, the nasty bits that no one thinks about is the entry down and the entry up. And you're just sort of going down a hole and coming out a hole. And just the length of going down and up to accommodate cars is very long. It's sort of not a good solution.
I suggest a bridge, but no one wants to do that.
Does anyone else want to?
This is a question that relates to one of the previous questions, and that is, you mentioned, you mentioned that if we cut off the main Riverside Drive road, that would essentially strangle the city. Does that not represent a bigger issue, that if you cut off one major road, you're crippling the city?
Well,
Should we be looking at a more robust transport strategy for all modes of transport through that area?
you should definitely be looking at increased public, and the government is looking at increased expenditure and investment in public transport, no doubt about it. But Riverside Drive has no alternative, and I don't think it's really understood the effect that cutting that road will be. They say, well, you can go in the tunnel or what have you, but the tunnel is a bypass only. Because Riverside Drive, apart from being a very attractive road to drive on, has access into the eastern part of the city and across from West Perth and backwards and forwards. Whereas you can't, now that they've narrowed down the inner city, like the CBD now has a bus lane, so there's only one lane in St George's Terrace and one lane in Newcastle Street. It's getting too tight and too strong. So you must have a balanced system, absolutely
So
correct.
surely on that basis then that a development strategy for transport should go hand in hand with the development strategy for Riverfront?
As I tried to say there, with all this increase in land use, you know, with lots more office workers in that location, the system is going to be overwhelmed. Not just there, but also in the Northbridge Link as well. The system won't cope, and it's not coping now. So they really do need to spend much more money on infrastructure, absolutely true, but don't forget roads, because people do still drive around.
Up there, back here?
Sorry, I did want to clarify with regard to cutting off Riverside Drive. Having looked at the plan, I think the Riverside Drive, to say it's cut off is slightly incorrect in that they're building a new Riverside Drive with, if you imagine the Esplanade Park as it is now, cuts about 50% of the way through it. So it's not as if the traffic would be redirected onto existing roads as much as directed around. And having looked at the maps, the comparison I thought was useful was that the distance that you would be driving around in the redirection was about 50% more than the Horseshoe Bridge. So it's a redirection, but I was actually against it until I realised that it wasn't actually putting it back onto the Esplanade Road. There's a separate Riverside Drive that's being rebuilt, so it's a redirection.
Well, can I just explain to you? You'll come along Riverside Drive. Let's say you're coming from east to west. You'll come along Riverside Drive and you'll come to Barrack Street, traffic lights. You'll turn right, and you'll have a choice. You'll be able to go on the new road, which will be traffic calm, so you won't be able to be very low-key, or back up to the Esplanade itself, the current Esplanade Road, traffic lights. Then new traffic lights at the two streets that come down, Howard Street and the other one, Sherwood Court. So traffic light, and traffic light at William Street, and you turn right again, you'll turn left again. You will go bananas. And so, you know, the length may be, as you suggest, and Mr. Barnett suggested the same thing in the Subiaco Post the other day, but you will go nuts. You will try to avoid that because you'll be trying to take your kids to school, or you'll be trying to go and visit the grandmother, or whatever you're doing. It's not just a journey to work. And you'll avoid it.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue that.
Ralph, I've driven that in peak hour, and I've come along Barrack Street, gone up Barrack Street, along the terrace and down in peak hour, and it took me 7 minutes. Because I listened to this argument, and I thought, well, I'm going to do a dog lead and just see how long it took in the peak hour.
Look, it's going to be twice as many.
7 minutes it took me, and I had to stop at lights. I think it's going to take longer, for sure.
Yeah, especially when you factor in the people who are trying to get in and out of those car parks.
Okay, well, I think that it's probably time to wrap up. So I would like to invite each of our panelists if they want to just make any final statements or conclude in any way. Now would be a good time to do it. Otherwise, we can wrap up.
Well,
won't say any more, but I've said a lot. But I'd like to invite anyone who's interested to have a look at just remind you of the citygatekeepers.com.au website. They cover a lot of these issues, and you might find it interesting to get a bit more insight into what's going on.
All the publicity we see for this development, talk about how we've got to get into the 21st century, think about the future, and be a modern city. But in fact, if we're destroying our heritage to do that, I think we're not actually meeting those criteria. We can actually do a development that incorporates the heritage and the history instead of, it's a very, very important heritage site, and I think there's an opportunity to do something clever, but we're not doing that.
I guess my only comment is what I said at the end of my talk was that whatever happens at that point, Perth's had a strong desire to keep its water birds on Perth water, and whatever gets done there is an opportunity to do something to create water bird habitat, whether it's by Little Island or something. There's an opportunity there, and it's not currently in the plan, and it would be nice if there was something there for the original inhabitants.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for coming tonight, and Central Institute of Technology would also like to thank you, and they've got a little gift here, which I'll give to you on your way out. And I want to thank everyone here for coming. Wouldn't be much of a Perth Green Drinks without you all. And let's go outside now and continue the conversation and get to know each other a bit more and have a drink. And if you haven't already joined our email list and you want to get information about future events, let myself or Flavia know. We can put you on the list. And don't forget to like us on Facebook.